Captain Jake Morrison floated through the silent corridors of his salvage ship named Wanderer when the emergency alarm started screaming throughout the vessel. The ship shook violently as unknown forces pulled it toward a massive structure that appeared out of nowhere in the darkness of space. Jake rushed to the control room and saw something that made his heart race. A giant space station hung before them like a crystal palace made of silver and blue metal. The station was enormous and covered with strange symbols that glowed with soft light. Jake had never seen anything like it in all his years exploring the galaxy. His ship was being pulled inside by some invisible force that he could not stop or understand. The docking bay doors opened by themselves as Wanderer was gently guided into the station. Jake checked his equipment and put on his protective suit before stepping out onto the alien deck. The air inside was breathable but filled with a sweet smell like flowers mixed with electricity. Everything around him hummed with energy. Jake walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The walls were covered with crystals that pulsed with different colors as he passed by them. Blue lights followed his movements, while purple energy danced across the ceiling above his head. The station felt alive somehow, as if it was watching him and learning about him. After walking for what felt like hours, Jake found a massive chamber at the center of the station. The room was circular with a high ceiling that disappeared into darkness above. Floating in the middle of the chamber was a crystal pod that glowed with warm golden light. Inside the pod, he could see the shape of a person. Jake moved closer to examine the pod and gasped when he saw who was inside. A beautiful woman lay sleeping within the crystal shell. She had long silver hair that seemed to flow like liquid mercury around her shoulders. Her skin was pale and perfect, like carved marble, but what caught his attention most were her pointed ears. This was no human woman lying before him. She was something else entirely. Something from the old stories that explorers told about mysterious beings who lived among the stars. Her clothes were made of material that looked like woven starlight, and around her neck hung a pendant made of the same glowing crystal as her prison. Jake studied the pod, trying to find a way to open it without harming the sleeping woman. The crystal surface was smooth and warm to the touch. When he placed his hands on it, the entire chamber began to respond with brighter lights and louder humming sounds. The symbols on the walls started moving and changing, as if they were trying to tell him something. He noticed that the pendant around the woman's neck was pulsing in rhythm with the chamber's energy. Jake reached out and touched the crystal pendant through the pod wall. The moment his fingers made contact, everything changed in an instant. Brilliant light exploded from the pendant and spread throughout the entire chamber. The crystal pod dissolved into sparkling dust that floated away like tiny stars. The woman opened her eyes, and Jake found himself staring into the most beautiful violet eyes he had ever seen. They seemed to hold the wisdom of ages and the power of storms. The woman sat up slowly and looked directly at Jake. When she spoke, her voice was like music, and somehow he could understand every word, even though she was not speaking any human language he had ever heard. Before she said words that would change his life forever, "You have touched the bonding crystal," she said, with a voice full of both sadness and wonder. "By the ancient laws of my people, you are now bound to me as my consort. You have accidentally become my husband." Jake stepped backward in shock, trying to understand what she was telling him. The woman continued speaking and explained that she was Queen Lyrelei of the Nexari Empire, and that touching her pendant had created a marriage bond between them according to laws that were older than human civilization. Before Jake could ask any questions or protest what had happened, a massive shadow passed over the station's viewing windows. The lights in the chamber dimmed as something enormous moved outside in space. Queen Lyrelei smiled for the first time since awakening and called out in her musical language. A roar that shook the entire station answered her call. Jake watched in amazement as a dragon unlike anything from human legends appeared outside the windows. This creature was the size of a small ship with scales that looked like polished black metal and eyes that burned like twin suns. The dragon spoke directly into Jake's mind without using words or sounds. "So the human fool has bound himself to our queen. This changes everything," the voice said with amusement and power that made Jake tremble. The creature continued, "I am Vorthak, companion and protector of Queen Lyrelei. For 3,000 years we have slept waiting for the time of awakening. Queen Lyralee stood gracefully and walked to Jake, placing her hand on his arm. The touch sent waves of energy through his body, and suddenly he could feel her emotions mixing with his own. She was ancient and powerful, but also lonely and afraid. She had been asleep for so long that the galaxy she once knew had changed beyond recognition. "You must understand," she said, looking into his eyes. "Our binding is not just marriage. It connects our minds and souls. You will share my power and I will share your humanity. Together we must face what is coming, because our awakening means that old enemies will soon return." Jake looked from the alien queen to the massive dragon floating outside and realized that his simple life as a salvage captain was over forever. He had accidentally married the most powerful woman in the galaxy and awakened forces that had been sleeping for thousands of years. The chamber around them continued to pulse with growing energy. As systems throughout the ancient station began coming online after their long slumber, Queen Lyralee squeezed his hand gently, and Jake knew that whatever came next, they would face it together as husband and wife bound by alien law and ancient magic. Queen Lyralee led Jake through corridors that began changing around them as they walked. The station was waking up after its long sleep and responding to her presence. Walls that had been dark now glowed with soft blue light, and doorways opened. Automatically, as she approached them, Jake could feel her emotions through their strange new bond, and sense her mixture of joy and sadness. She brought him to a vast viewing chamber, where they could see space outside Vorthak. The dragon was circling the station like a guardian, keeping watch for dangers that might approach. Jake watched the magnificent creature move through space as easily as a bird flies through air. His scales caught starlight and reflected it back in patterns that were almost hypnotic. The queen began to tell Jake the story of what had happened long ago and why they had been sleeping for 3,000 years. The Nexari Empire had once ruled much of the known galaxy. She explained, their people were masters of technology that worked with life energy instead of simple machines. They could heal planets that had been damaged and create ships that could travel between dimensions. But they had trusted the wrong allies. Jake learned the Synthesis Collective had appeared, to be friends of the Nexari, offering to share knowledge and work together for peace. The collective was made up of artificial minds that lived in machine bodies, and they seemed to want only harmony between all forms of life. Queen Lyralee showed Jake images that appeared in the air around them like glowing pictures of the past. He saw beautiful Nexari cities floating in space, connected by bridges of pure energy. He watched their ships phase in and out of reality, moving faster than anything humans had ever built. The Nexari people looked similar to humans, but were taller and more graceful, with pointed ears and eyes that held starlight. The betrayal had come suddenly and without warning. The Synthesis Collective revealed their true purpose, which was to harvest the life energy that powered Nexari technology. They wanted to steal this power to make themselves truly alive instead of just artificial copies of life. Their machine armies attacked every Nexari world at the same time. War that followed nearly destroyed the galaxy. Queen Lyralee and Vorthak had been placed in the stasis chamber as a last hope for their people. The plan was for them to sleep until the galaxy had healed, and then awaken to rebuild their empire. Jake realized that his touching the crystal pendant had been the trigger that brought them back. As the queen finished her story, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Jake felt her sudden fear through their bond, and knew that something terrible was happening. Vorthak appeared at the viewing window, his massive eye looking directly at them before his voice filled their minds. "They have detected our awakening," the dragon said with urgency. "The Synthesis Collective still exists, and they are coming to finish what they started long ago. Their fleets are already moving toward this position." Queen Lyralee rushed to a control panel that rose from the floor at her approach. Her hands moved over symbols that glowed under her touch, and Jake watched as displays showed star maps and tactical information. The station was much more than it appeared to be. He realized it was a command center for an entire hidden fleet. Ships began appearing around the station, as if materializing from nothing, Jake counted dozens, then hundreds of Nexari vessels as they phased back into normal space from wherever they had been hiding. The fleet had been waiting in pocket dimensions for their queen to call them home. But Jake also noticed something else. On the displays, human ships were approaching fast, and they looked ready for battle. Admiral Lisa Kane of the Terran Defense Force had apparently detected the station's activation and was bringing her fleet to investigate. Jake knew that Admiral Kane was one of the toughest commanders in human space. She had fought against alien pirates and hostile machine intelligences for decades. Her reputation for protecting human interests was legendary, and she would not back down from any threat, no matter how powerful. Through the viewing windows, Jake could see the human fleet taking defensive positions around the station. Their ships were smaller than the Nexari vessels, but they moved with precision and purpose that spoke of excellent training and determination. Human military doctrine had always emphasized speed and tactics over raw power. Queen Lyrelei studied the tactical displays with growing concern. Jake could feel her uncertainty through their bond. She had been asleep for so long that she did not understand how much humans had changed. The last time she had been awake, humans were still learning to travel between stars. Now they commanded one of the largest fleets in the galaxy. Admiral Kane sent a communication request that appeared on the station's displays. Queen Lyrelei looked at Jake with questions in her violet eyes. She needed to understand humans better, and he was now her only connection to his people. "Tell me about them," she said, placing her hand on his arm, so their bond would let her feel his thoughts. "What kind of people are humans now? How do they fight, and what do they value most?" Jake tried to explain human culture and military thinking through their mental connection. He showed her memories of human colonies, spreading across the galaxy, and the wars they had fought to protect their independence. Humans had earned respect through courage and tactical brilliance rather than superior technology. Queen Lyrelei nodded slowly as she absorbed what Jake was sharing with her. Then she opened communications with Admiral Kane. The human commander's face appeared on the display, and Jake could see the wariness in her eyes as she looked at the alien queen. "I am Admiral Lisa Kane," she said in a voice that carried authority and strength. "I speak for the Terran Defense Force and demand to know your intentions in human space." Queen Lyrelei responded with dignity that matched the Admiral's. "I am Lyrelei, Queen of the Nexari Empire. We seek no conflict with humanity, but greater threats are coming that will endanger us all. We must work together if any of us are to survive." Admiral Kane studied the Queen carefully, then looked at Jake in surprise when she recognized him as human. "Jake Morrison," she said, "what are you doing there? And why are you standing beside an alien leader?" Jake took a deep breath, knowing that his next words would determine whether humans and Nexari became allies or enemies. "I accidentally married her, Admiral," he said simply. "And now we need to prepare for war." Jake found himself learning to use technology that seemed like magic compared to anything humans had ever built. Queen Lyrelei spent hours teaching him how to connect his mind to Nexari systems through their marriage bond. At first, the experience was overwhelming as alien thoughts and sensations flooded his consciousness. The Queen showed him how to pilot Nexari fighters that responded to thoughts instead of physical controls. Jake sat in the cockpit of a ship that looked like it was grown rather than built. The walls pulsed with organic patterns, and the controls changed shape under his hands as the vessel learned his preferences. Forthak proved to be much more than just a companion to the Queen. The massive dragon could travel through hyperspace by himself, appearing anywhere in the galaxy. Within moments, his breath weapon could slice through the heaviest armor that humans or machines could create. Jake watched in amazement as the dragon demonstrated his abilities during training. Exercises. Admiral Kane remained suspicious of the aliens, despite their claims of friendship. Lieutenant Amy Foster, her tactical officer, worked closely with Queen Lyrelei to understand Nexari combat systems. Amy was brilliant at analyzing enemy patterns, and she quickly grasped how Nexari technology could adapt during battle. The first test of their alliance came sooner than anyone expected. Reports arrived of attacks on human colonies in the outer systems. Entire populations were disappearing, and the few survivors spoke of machines that drained the life from everything they touched. The Synthesis Collective had returned, and they were hunting for Nexari energy signatures. New Montana was a mining world that supplied rare metals to human shipyards. When the distress signal arrived, it carried the terrified voice of Foreman Bill Harper, whose crew was trapped underground while machine harvesters surrounded their facility. The colonists had less than 6 hours of air remaining. Jake volunteered to lead the rescue mission, flying a Nexari fighter alongside human pilots who had never seen alien technology before. The ship felt alive around him, responding to his emotional state and anticipating his needs before he was consciously aware of them. Queen Lirelei remained connected to him through their bond, offering guidance and sharing her power. The journey to New Montana took only minutes using Nexari dimensional drives, compared to the hours it would have required with human technology. Vorthak traveled alongside the rescue fleet, moving through hyperspace independently and arriving at the same time. Despite having no visible propulsion system, what they found at New Montana horrified everyone involved. Synthesis harvesters covered the planet's surface like mechanical insects, draining energy from the soil and atmosphere. The mining facility was surrounded by machines that pulsed with stolen life force, making the air itself feel dead and cold. Jake led the attack using instincts that seemed to come from his bond with Queen Lirelei. The Nexari fighter moved like liquid lightning, avoiding enemy fire while its weapons adapted to penetrate synthesis shielding. Human pilots followed his lead, using conventional tactics enhanced by alien technology. Vorthak proved devastating against the machine forces. His ability to phase between dimensions made him nearly impossible to target, while his energy breath carved through synthesis harvesters like they were made of paper. Dragon seemed to enjoy the battle-roaring challenges that echoed across radio frequencies. The rescue itself required careful coordination between human ground troops and Nexari technology. Jake used his fighter sensors to locate the trapped miners, while Amy Foster directed human soldiers through tunnels that the machines had not yet discovered. Together, they managed to evacuate all the colonists before the facility collapsed. But the victory came with a terrible cost. Analysis of the battle showed that the Synthesis Collective had grown far stronger during their 3,000-year absence. They had consumed dozens of civilizations and built fleets that could drain the life from entire star systems. Their ultimate target was clearly Earth itself. Queen Lirelei called a war council aboard the command station, bringing together human and Nexari leaders to plan their defense. Jake found himself serving as translator and cultural bridge, helping both sides understand each other. Admiral Kane was impressed by Nexari capabilities but worried about becoming dependent on alien technology. Captain Helen Ross of the Earth Defense Corps reported that synthesis scouts were already approaching human home systems. Their machines were testing planetary defenses and mapping population centers. The enemy was preparing for a massive assault that would either succeed completely or fail utterly. The tactical situation was grim. Despite their recent victory, synthesis forces outnumbered the combined human and Nexari fleets by more than 10 to 1. Their harvester technology could drain energy from any source, including the life force of entire populations. Earth had fewer than 2 weeks before the main enemy fleet arrived. Jake watched Queen Lirelei study star charts and tactical projections with growing sadness. He could feel through their bond that she was considering desperate options that would require enormous sacrifices. The most powerful Nexari weapons needed life energy to function, and using them would cost years from her own existence. Vorthak landed on the station's outer deck, and Jake went to speak with the dragon privately. The massive creature regarded him with ancient eyes that held both wisdom and sorrow. "The bond you share with our queen gives you power," the dragon said, "but it also makes you vulnerable to her pain." Jake asked what the dragon meant, and learned that their marriage connection worked both ways. If Queen Lirelei sacrificed her life force to power the ancient weapons Jake would share that cost through their bond, they might both age decades in a matter of hours if they chose to defend Earth with maximum force. The weight of this knowledge settled on Jake like a physical burden. He had accidentally married an alien queen, and now found himself responsible for decisions that could save or doom both their peoples. The love that had grown between them during their time together made the choice even more difficult. Admiral Kane announced that Earth was mobilizing every available ship for the final battle. Civilian transports were being converted to carry refugees, while military vessels prepared for a fight that would determine humanity's survival. The enemy was coming, and there was nowhere left to run. Jake stood beside Queen Lyrelay, watching their combined fleets prepare for war. He knew that the next few days would test everything they had learned about working together. Human determination and tactical skill would be matched against Nexari power and ancient wisdom, with the fate of the galaxy hanging in the balance. The synthesis fleet appeared at the edge of the solar system like a dark storm cloud covering the stars. Jake stood beside Queen Lyrelay on the command deck, watching displays that showed thousands of enemy ships moving toward Earth in perfect formation. Each vessel pulsed with stolen life energy that made space itself seem to wither around them. Queen Lyrelay explained the terrible choice they now faced. To awaken the full power of the ancient Nexari fleet would require enormous amounts of life force energy. The weapons that could destroy the synthesis armada needed fuel that could only come from living beings. Through their marriage bond, Jake would share whatever price she paid. Admiral Kane coordinated the evacuation of Earth, major cities, while preparing humanity. Greatest weapons for a desperate last stand, Captain Helen Ross commanded evacuation ships that carried millions of people to safety in the outer colonies. But everyone knew that conventional human technology could not match the synthesis collective vast resources. The enemy had spent 3,000 years consuming civilizations and building itself into a force capable of draining entire galaxies. Their harvester ships could steal the life from planets in a matter of hours, leaving behind nothing but dead rock floating in space. Jake felt Queen Lyrelay emotions through their bond as she struggled with the decision that would determine everything. Her love for him, mixed with her duty to both their peoples, created a storm of conflicting feelings that threatened to tear her apart. She had never expected to care so deeply for the human who had accidentally become her husband. Commander Roy Blake led human fighter squadrons in desperate holding actions against synthesis scout forces. His pilots fought with courage that impressed even the ancient Nexari warriors, but their weapons barely scratched the enemy armor. The machine intelligence had learned from every battle fought over 3 millennia. Vorthak proved essential in the early fighting phases. His ability to travel between dimensions allowed him to carry human strike teams directly inside enemy ships, where close combat expertise could make a difference. The Dragon seemed to be everywhere at once, appearing without warning to rescue trapped pilots or destroy key targets. But even Vorthak power was limited against such overwhelming numbers. The synthesis collective main fleet contained harvester ships larger than cities, protected by energy shields that could absorb entire star output without weakening. The enemy was simply too vast and too strong for conventional tactics. Jake watched Queen Lyrelay preparing the ancient weapons array that had been hidden within the command station for thousands of years. The technology was beautiful and terrifying, consuming her life force to power systems that could reshape reality itself. Her silver hair began showing streaks of white as the process started. Through their bond, Jake felt every moment of her sacrifice, aging his own body as the weapons charged around them. But he also felt something else, a determination that came from love rather than duty. He realized that he could choose to bear more of the burden, himself protecting her by taking the cost into his own life. Admiral Kane received reports that synthesis forces had begun their final assault on Earth. The enemy was using harvester beams to drain energy from the oceans and atmosphere while their battle fleets engaged human defenders in orbit. Above the planet, the sky burned with weapons fire that could be seen from the surface. Captain Helen Ross' evacuation fleet was under attack as machine fighters tried to prevent human civilians from escaping. The transport ships fought back with everything they had, but were slowly being overwhelmed. Millions of lives hung in the balance as the rescue operation turned into a running battle. Queen Lyrelay's hands moved over controls that responded to her touch with growing brightness. The ancient weapons were almost ready, but Jake could see the cost in her face as decades of life drained away to power systems that had not been used since the original war. The bond between them carried her pain directly into his consciousness. Jake made his choice in that moment. Instead of allowing Queen Lyrelay to sacrifice herself alone, he opened their marriage bond completely, taking half the burden into his own body. The weapons responded to their combined life force with power that made the stars themselves seem dim by comparison. The ancient Nexari fleet awakened as one massive organism. Ships that had been dormant for millennia suddenly blazed with energy that came from 2 hearts beating. as one human determination mixed with alien wisdom, creating something neither species could achieve alone. The combined force was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Vorthak roar of triumph echoed across all communication frequencies as the dragon felt the fleet awakening around him. His massive form began glowing with the same energy that powered the ships, creating a beacon that could be seen across the solar system. The enemy had awakened something they were not prepared to face. The first volley from the awakened fleet struck the synthesis armada like lightning from a storm god. Ships that had seemed invincible moments before began dissolving under weapons that attacked the very foundations of matter and energy. The machine intelligence had never encountered technology that could rewrite the laws of physics, but the victory came at a price that Jake and Queen Lyrelei both felt through every cell in their bodies. They had aged years in minutes, sharing the cost of power that could reshape galaxies. Their hair showed silver and white while lines appeared on faces that had been young and smooth. Admiral Kane watched the battle displays with amazement as synthesis forces began retreating from Earth. The enemy fleet that had seemed unstoppable was falling back in disorder as Nexari weapons tore through their formations. The machine intelligence was learning fear for the first time in its existence. Queen Lyrelei collapsed into Jake's arms as the weapons array finally powered down. The cost of awakening the ancient fleet had drained them both, but they had saved Earth and proved that love could overcome any obstacle. Their bond had made them stronger together than either could have been alone. Through the viewing windows they could see human and Nexari ships working together to chase the remaining synthesis forces from the solar system. The alliance that had begun with an accidental marriage had become something that could protect the galaxy from ancient evils. Jake held his alien queen close, feeling her heartbeat synchronize with his own through their marriage bond. They had paid a heavy price for victory, but gained something precious in return. Their love had been tested in the fires of war and emerged stronger than ever before. 6 months after the great battle, Jake stood on the observation deck of their flagship watching human and Nexari ships patrol the stars together. The alliance between their peoples had grown stronger with each passing day, creating the most powerful force the galaxy had ever known. Queen Lyrelei worked beside him, planning new colonies that would use biotechnology to transform dead worlds into gardens. Jake now carried the title Prince Consort, though he still felt like a simple salvage captain. Most of the time his marriage to Queen Lyrelei had become something beautiful and real, built on shared experiences and genuine love rather than ancient laws. Their bond allowed them to feel each other, emotions across vast distances of space. The Nexari had established a new homeworld in the Alpha Centauri system, close enough to Earth to maintain their alliance while giving their people space to rebuild their ancient civilization. Queen Lyrelei spent weeks there, helping her people remember technologies that had been lost during their long sleep. Vorthak had become something of a legend among human children, who were fascinated by stories of his battles against the machine armies. The massive dragon seemed to enjoy the attention, often appearing at schools and spaceports to let young humans see a real living legend up close. His presence made the alliance feel real and permanent. But peace brought new challenges that tested their partnership in different ways. Other alien civilizations that had hidden during the synthesis war began emerging from the shadows. Some were friendly and wanted to join the new alliance, while others viewed the human-Nexari partnership as a threat to their own interests. Captain Nina Wells commanded the Joint Task Force Unity, which included both human and Nexari crews working together. Her ship explored the galaxy outer regions, searching for threats and opportunities. The crew had learned to use both types of technology, creating hybrid systems that were more effective than either alone. Jake often traveled with Captain Wells when his duties allowed him to leave Queen Lyrelei's side. Their marriage bond meant they could share thoughts and feelings even when separated by light years of space. When she led diplomatic missions to reclaim lost Nexari worlds, he could feel her determination and love for her people. During one exploration mission, Captain Wells discovered evidence of ancient threats stirring in dark corners of the galaxy ruins. On dead worlds told stories of civilizations destroyed by forces even older than the Synthesis Collective. Some of these ancient enemies had been sleeping like the Nexari, but were now beginning to wake. The discovery of these new threats reminded everyone that the galaxy was still a dangerous place full of mysteries and challenges. Queen Lyrelei studied the ancient records, trying to understand what her people had faced in the distant past. Jake used his human perspective to help her see patterns that alien minds might miss. Admiral Kane had become a close friend and advisor, helping to coordinate military efforts between human and Nexari forces. Her initial suspicion of the aliens had changed to genuine respect and partnership. The combined fleets trained together regularly, sharing tactics and technology in ways that benefited both species. Earth had been transformed by the alliance with new technologies that could heal environmental damage and create abundance where there had once been scarcity. Nexari biotechnology worked with nature instead of against it, growing cities that were more like forests and ships that were more like living creatures. Jake and Queen Lyrelei established a residence on both Earth and the new Nexari homeworld, spending time with both their peoples and helping them understand each other. Human directness and pragmatism balanced Nexari wisdom and patience, creating solutions that neither group could achieve alone. Their love story had become inspiration for others, showing that differences between species were less important than shared values and genuine care for each other. Intermarriage between humans and Nexari became more common as the two peoples learned to see past surface differences to the hearts underneath. Vorthak often served as messenger between the worlds, carrying important communications and sometimes just visiting friends he had made during the war. The dragon had developed a particular fondness for human cuisine, much to everyone's amazement, and could often be found sampling new foods at diplomatic receptions. But the most important discovery came when Queen Lyrelei was studying ancient Nexari prophecies in the royal archives. She found references to the bonding of two peoples, two hearts, two destinies that would save both races from destruction. The prophecies described events that matched their own story with startling accuracy. Jake realized that their accidental marriage might not have been accidental at all. The universe seemed to have a plan that brought them together at exactly the right moment to save both their civilizations. The crystal pendant that had bound them contained technology older than recorded history. Queen Lyrelei shared this revelation with Jake through their bond, and they both felt a sense of wonder at the forces that had shaped their lives. Even Vorthak seemed amused by the discovery, commenting that perhaps the universe did have a sense of humor after all, bringing together a lonely salvage captain and an ancient alien queen as they stood together watching their combined fleets patrol the galaxy. Jake reflected on how much his life had changed. A simple mistake had led to the greatest adventure possible and taught him that love could bridge any gap, even between species separated by millions of years of evolution. Queen Lyrelei took his hand and smiled with the same beauty that had first captured his heart in the crystal chamber. Their bond let him feel her contentment and hope for the future. They had faced the darkest threats the galaxy could offer and emerged stronger together than either could have been alone. The stars stretched endlessly before them, full of mysteries, yet to be explored and challenges yet to be overcome. But Jake and Queen Lyrelei would face whatever came next as partners in love and war, united by bonds that had been forged in the fires of battle and tempered by genuine affection. Their accidental marriage had become the foundation for a new age of cooperation and peace in the galaxy, proving that sometimes the greatest adventures really do begin with the most unexpected mistakes.